So again, divine proportion, theosophical roots, and Renaissance. So the divine proportion is the principle of harmony or equilibrium that lies behind the very founding of the Theosophical Society. According to H.P. Blavatsky, the rules of proportion were a carefully guarded secret revealed only at initiation within the mystery schools. It was hidden within Plato's esoteric teachings, and today it's at the heart of the most advanced discoveries in science. So my role here is to try to at least help reintroduce us to the roots of the Theosophical, the foundation of the society, and we need to be aware of all of these big developments that are occurring because we're part of it, and we need to actually take credit for it. So Plato and the Pythagoreans, it was Douglas Baker who came to, when I was at the University of Minnesota, came to Minneapolis, first introduced me to the ancient wisdom. Here we're in, actually at one of his esoteric festivals of yoga and esoteric sciences, and we're in Cape Town, South Africa. Well, what he did for me was he introduced me to the broad range of the wisdom traditions, which is what Theosophy is really all about, and particularly to Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. That's the number one writer, thinker in my book in the world. And she's the one who made it very clear that Plato is not one of the world's interpreters, he is the world's interpreter. And furthermore, as you see, the ideas of both Pythagoras and Plato were identical with ours. Plato is a Pythagorean. That's the primary essence of who he is. And that, of course, was in the Key to Theosophy, page 96. Philolaus, the great Pythagorean, in fragment 4 says this: "And all things that can be known contain number. Without this, nothing can be thought or known." The Mahatmas themselves, in the letters to A.P. Synod, in our study group, this is one of the things we're going to be looking at more closely, is letter number 90. Chronologically, it's letter number 22 in the original writings. And Joy Mills did a beautiful piece in her work Reflections that we're going to look at her account of it as well. It is packed with incredible information, but in particular, this statement is really the key as far as I'm concerned, because we're looking at the pillars of wisdom. What are the laws? What are the universal principles that lie behind the society? In the end, there's one. There is one ultimate pillar. We recognize but one law in the universe, the law of harmony, of perfect equilibrium. That's KH in letter number 90. That perfect equilibrium, as I'm going to attempt to show you today, is in fact the divine proportion. The divine proportion is based upon the primordial scission that the ancient Egyptians called it, which is the golden section. It gives rise to what we call the golden mean, which also gives rise to the ratio, golden ratio. When you repeat the same ratio, that's when you have proportion. There's only one way to do a single, simple cut to get proportion immediately, as we will see. So 100 years after the inauguration of our society, that's when I kind of woke up a bit. Before that I was doing things, but you may notice here that everything that I started to publish, 1975, Plato's Occult Doctrine, these are monographs. Platonic Aesthetics was my Summa thesis. I graduated from the University of Minnesota in 1975, did my last stint at the Mr. Minnesota, went and lectured at the International Festival of Yoga and Esoteric Sciences with the Baker in New York City. Then I flew across the pond. So that's when I came to the UK to work for DB, but then also study under David Bohm at Birkbeck. And then, of course, I was also working on alchemy. All of those were published that same year. So when I went to the ashram, Little Elephant, it's named after Baker himself. That is a name that was given to him by the Mahatmas, the great souls. Why? Because of his incredible memory. He was known to them, the masters, as a Little Elephant, hence his ashram, the English ashram. And I spent a lot of time with him, both lecturing various parts of the world, not that I'm posing here for him, but sometimes he'd want me on stage with him, and he was my main mentor. I've had many. Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut, as Pam was saying, Houston Smith was important. Actually, my father was an absolute saint, and my mother was an angel. So in the Mahatma letters, we find out that Plato is coming from the future. He's coming from the future to teach us in the present. We're in the 4th round. He's what the Mahatmas call a 5th rounder. So he's way advanced, coming into the present to teach. Little did I know, I knew that there was something up with the Platonic traditions, but I didn't realize the Nirmanakaya, who was Plato, overshadowed Little Elephant. That's what was going on, and that was the source of our teaching and discoveries. So Madame Blavatsky makes a very important point in The Secret Doctrine, Volume 1 of the 1888 edition, page 208. She says, now this is a paraphrase, but I know exactly what she's saying. Most significantly, it is the golden proportional symmetry that was revealed in the ancient initiations passed down by the adepts of the 4th root race. The adepts of the 4th root race are far in advance of our humanity. These were wise, extremely wise individuals. It looks like they may have built the original Great Pyramid, which has been rebuilt over time. And we don't have the technology, the capacity, the engineering knowledge. We have the geniuses like Muhammad al-Nashi, both physicist and engineer, and Alexei Stakov, but we don't have the people who could actually construct that pyramid today. It is stunning. So the adepts are the ones who gave us this proportional symmetry from the 4th root race, and it's within this initiatory tradition of the mysteries that quote, now pure quotation, all the rules of proportion are those taught anciently. These are her italics. I didn't do this. She's doing this, so when you read The Secret Doctrine, you pay attention. Taught anciently at initiations, and one should acquaint oneself with the truly divine art and understand the deep esoteric significance hidden in every rule and law of proportion. Now, I know for a fact, in Vision Quest in the rainforest, I was taken out of my body, actually in the body at the same time, but showing how this works, I was awake for 19 days straight as a result. 6 months later, the Golden Section book is written, primarily at Glastonbury, and it's in 9 languages now, won first place at the New York Book Show for design. So the mystery of the Golden Section. Also, by the way, I do a lot of research with near-death experiencers. Near-death experiencers, when they go into that non-local state, have the life review, very empathic life review. Sometimes the secrets of mathematics are revealed to them. Look up Adolph Sundin, Tom Sawyer, incredible. Sundin didn't have any experience with chemistry. He comes back, he has over 100 patents in chemistry now. Sawyer comes back and he knows all of the equations, Planck's equations, all of the Einsteinian material. They're geniuses, and something has been awakened in them, and there's a part of the brain, by the way, that switches on. Brain is not the producer of consciousness. It's more like a computer or television set. But the right temporal lobe near the sylvan fissure gets switched on, and that's where the creativity, it's over here. We do the analytic stuff with the left, but the right is spatial, but also religious and spiritual experiences. And that part of our computer, the software gets switched on. It's latent, it's always there. And then suddenly you become, instead of like a TV set with a channel or two, or now you got cable, you get the satellite dish. You ask the right question, the answers come back, as Einstein figured out, for example. Okay, so the great mystery of the ancients was Plato's indefinite dyad. Sometimes he referred to the greater and the lesser, but it was a dyad, a twosome that was indefinite. Aristotle made it very clear that this second principle was not only in the academy, but you find it scattered throughout the dialogues. But he had to keep his mouth somewhat quiet. It was forbidden to reveal the great secrets of the Eleusinian mysteries, the Samothracian mysteries, Pythagorean mysteries, or the Egyptian mysteries. It was called the Sodalian Oath, as Madame Blavatsky points out. Penalty of death. Hippasus revealed the structure of the dodecahedron, which Plato wisely didn't do in the Timaeus. Hippasus, they put in a boat, they sent him out to sea, and he drowned. So they were very serious about not revealing these secrets. It was just too deeply esoteric. So the big question is, what is the indefinite dyad? In the Republic, Plato says, take a line, cut it unevenly. Well, first of all, why does he take a line? Well, instead of numbers, because it's Pythagorean. Well, numbers cannot capture incommensurability, because the digits, if we do decimals, they go all the way to infinity. You can't capture it. But with lines, you can, geometrically. Why not cut it evenly? Well, if you cut it in half, then the ratio, which in Greek is logos, this is all about John chapter 1, verse 1 as well. In the beginning was the first cut, the logos. Before that, there's only the one. When the one creates, it divides, and then it fractalizes, and the whole universe is holographic. Every level is self-similar, has the same relationships. So if you take a line and you cut it in half, the whole line to either segment would be 2 to 1. But each segment to each other would be 1 to 1. 2 to 1 is not the same as 1 to 1. But if you cut it correctly, that whole line, the entire line from top to bottom, if cut correctly, the whole is to the longer in the same ratio as the longers to the shorter. That's called analogos. That's where we get the word proportion. So you go from ratio logos to analogos proportion. I was talking to Muhammad El-Nashi when we're doing our recent dialogues in Kabam, which will be on, we'll put those on YouTube eventually. Probably get about a dozen of them out of 3 days, 3 hours at a shot. But it's like he said, and he's so wise, he knows what's going on. Once the divine had worked out the logic, and I don't even think it's a matter of working it out. This is an ontological move. This is pre-mathematics. This is pre-number. So once there's logic, there's only one way to do it. It is the most functional, simple. God's hands are tied, in other words. There's only one way it could happen. And that's why we have Fibonacci numbers galore, golden ratios everywhere, etc. So here I actually cut it lower. You could cut it up there, you could cut it down here. So in the end, what happens is, when you create these ratios, that's the Greek letter phi, the uppercase version. That would be the greater. Here's the lesser, it's reciprocal, 1 over phi. I actually call it little baby phi. And 1 is the geometric mean that bonds these two together. That's the basis of the Trinity. So if we begin again, as we did initially, saying take a line, which we count as 1. Now each smaller portion is obviously going to be less than 1. So when you golden cut it, there you get what we call phi, or the lesser, but in this case, 0.6180339 goes on to infinity. If you square that, you get the even smaller portion. You square little baby phi, just like if you square 2, 1/2, I should say, you get 1/4. It grows smaller and smaller. It's all about Allison through the looking glass. Eat me, grow bigger, eat me, grow smaller. Both directions, you keep the same ratios or relationships. And so now if you ask, what's the ratio of the whole line to the longer segment? Now it becomes big phi, the greater, is to unity, or 1, just as 1 is to the lesser 0.618. Here's your trinity that the Neoplatonists, mathematicians in Alexandria, taught to the Christians. This is Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. This is Tao, Yang and Yin. It is Sattvas, Rajas, and Tamas. It is your trinities that lie behind all deep secrets. So if you take the whole line and you cut it, and you get the upper, that would be Plato's intelligible realm. There's the lower sensible realm down below. There's the world of forms, mathematicals, everyday objects, shadows on the wall, reflections, which are distortions as long as we have people who are not honest with us, people who mislead us. That becomes akasia. It becomes false conjecture, illusion. But when you actually go into illumination, what happens is you recognize these shadows are reflections of everyday objects, which are reflecting the mathematicals, which reflect the forms, which ultimately reflect the one and the indefinite dyad, the source from which everything came. By the way to do this is very simple. This is the solution to the divided line of Plato. Put my compass point here, pencil lead there, arc down, crossing right here. There's the fourfold division of Plato's line, divided line. So in 2002, I published The Indefinite Dyad in the Golden Section of Uncovering Plato's Second Principle. That was in the Nexus Journal of Architecture and Mathematics. So here it is. Here's your template. So you have the one, and then you have more than one. How much more? That much more. And then you have the lesser. How much less? One minus. Actually, it turns out that if you subtract the one from the greater, you'll get this. But if this is less than 1 by this actually squared, the 0.382 that we were seeing originally. But that is the 1 and the indefinite dyad. That's the template that was forbidden to reveal. So we come to Plato's cave, and in the Republic, Plato puts 3 similes that are in there. They're allegories, but they are there to awaken you, much like he did in the Academy. The whole process of Plato is to present the problem, the puzzle, the apparent contradiction, the dead end, and the members of the Academy would abduct, retroduct. It's a form of logic that goes up out of the cave instead of deduction and induction, garbage in, garbage out. This is new creative hypotheses that take the right hemisphere and they invoke it. So the geniuses like Kepler, Bohm, and Einstein, when they puzzle over the anomalies, unlike everybody else who shoves them under the rug, they go into states of illumination, creativity, and like Archimedes, aha, eureka, I got it. That's where relativity theory comes from. That's where all the great discoveries come from. So in the Timaeus now, not Republic, Plato gives us a big hint. He says 2 things cannot be rightly put together without a third. That's at Timaeus 31b to 32a. So think back to Hermes. As above, so below, and as below, so above. Beautiful. As with the macrocosm, so with the microcosm in reverse. However, you need a third factor. You need the mean, the median, the mode, the middle, the mesocosm. That's what Theosophy, wisdom traditions are all about. So, the best fusion, the fairest bond, is proportion, analogia. And it is not arithmetic mean, it is not harmonic mean, it is actually geometric mean is the key. He gives us, actually, I should tell you, the lambda. Lambda is a Greek letter that looks like an upside down V. He goes 1, 2, 4, 8, 1, 3, 9, 27. Every number is the geometric mean between the 2 associated numbers. So if you take 2 and 8, you multiply them together, 2 times 8 is 16. You take their square root, bingo, 4. 4 becomes the bond, the glue between the above and the below. The big question has always been, how does the immaterial realm bond together with the material? Descartes had a heck of a time trying to locate it in the pineal gland, the animal spirits. It turns out to be done through ratios, and hence proportions through a geometric mean. Plato's intelligible realm, those of you who know a little bit about Plato, and his sensible material realm are bonded together through the mathematics, and maybe I can show you a little bit. So we have the shadows on the wall. Here's the prisoners. Behind them, unbeknownst to them, this is Maya. Here is the wall, the puppeteers are holding up cutouts, cardboard cutouts. There's a fire behind them. Every stage of illumination through a series of quantum leaps, quantum steps up out of the cave. It's a series. What Plato does is he takes the one, divides it into two, so you have the one, or good, and then you have the sun. Then in the cave, he divides that two into four. Into the intelligible realm made up of forms, mathematicals, and the lower sensible realm, everyday objects, and then the shadows on the wall. Then when he gets to the cave, it goes to 8. So 1, 2, 4, 8. Just like the lambda, it's all geometric means. The thing about the divine proportion, the golden ratio, it is the geometric mean of all geometric means. I have been entrusted with the golden key. I tell you folks, I don't go around saying this, but that golden key is why people like Muhammad al-Nashi will take any puzzle, turn that key, and solve dark energy, dark matter, you name it, and it is solved. So one of the prisoners, of course, turns around and discovers there's a fire, and then notices these other things. And these transition places, here's the wall, here are the prisoners, they're watching the shadows. But notice, behind the wall, people, puppeteers, are putting up these cutouts to create the shadows. So that's our consensus reality, the apparent reality that was being discussed the other day. So in the three similes, here you have it, you begin with the 1, and then 1 is to 2, is as 2 is to 4, is as 4 is to 8. So it's 1/2 all the way through. All of these are equivalent ratios, and you have your sun simile, divided line, and cave. I used to think that Plato had wisely on the scrolls. These were not books. But stichometry is a method of counting the pages based upon the works of Homer. And this was common knowledge. What Plato did, the authorities didn't realize it, he put the divided line essentially at the golden cut of the entire scroll. But even better than that, I now realize he did it in the first cut, the first ratio, in the sun simile. That is smack dab at the golden section of the Republic. So I've worked very hard on this, and we haven't really discussed the lettering here. These would be little baby fees now. Here's one which divides into 0.618 and roughly 0.382. But then it continues to fractalize in the divided line, and then you move to the cave and you'll see the process, and every stage there are these quantum moves, transitions up into ultimately illumination. And if you turn this on its side, you'll see, I mean, it's incredible that he was able to encode it. This would be basically the greater is to 1 as 1 is to the lesser. Because it's all relative in the sense of which numbers, how big they are, how small, much like Alice learned by going through the looking glass. But I need to keep going. Plato's Timaeus. So the Timaeus, here again, he borrowed that from the Pythagoreans. It really was not his work, but it is his most important cosmological work. We know from his nephew Speusippus, who took over the academy after he died. Probably that's why Aristotle didn't take over, because Speusippus was a Pythagorean, and he understood it. But in the fragments, we learn that in addition to the root 2 triangle and the root 3 triangle that Plato gives us in the Timaeus, Plato actually also mentions this. 1 is represented by the equilateral triangle. All the sides are equal. Then you have the root 2 triangle that is used to build squares and cubes or earth. And then you have the equilateral triangle bisected, gives you root 3, the 3rd triangle, which builds up the tetrahedron fire, the octahedron air, and the icosahedron water. But what he doesn't do, and it's conspicuous by its absence, is tell us how to build a pentagon, which is one of the 12 faces of the cosmos, which is the dodecahedron. Even though he tells us in the Timaeus, these create the elements, but this is the cosmos itself, the dodecahedron. It's conspicuous by its absence. So he starts out the dialogue, 1, 2, 3. Where's the fourth, my dear Timaeus? There had been 4 people there yesterday. One has become sick, but this is Plato's cryptic way, hint, hint, esoterically, for those who kind of switched on their right hemisphere to abduct the solution. So here are the solids. Here are the 3 solids that have the equilateral triangles bisected, so they're all root 3, and those 3, I've already named them, you can see them. The Earth is the cube, that's the root 2 one, but this is the biggie. But anytime you have a pentagon, you have a pentagram, to build it, you have to understand the golden ratio, the golden section, and that was absolutely forbidden. So what Plato then does at Timaeus 53a to 54b, he says, these then we assume to be the original elements of fire and the other bodies, but the principles which are prior to these, God alone knows, and those who are friends of deity. And then he gives the big hint. Anyone who can point out a more beautiful form than ours for the construction of these bodies shall carry off the palm. Not as an enemy, but as a friend. He who disproves what we are saying and shows that we are mistaken may claim a friendly victory. Hint, hint, hint. But the scholars don't really pay attention to the fact that he's trying to get you to abduct the solution. So I did a construction, and I was telling Suzanne from Devon the other day that it was at Buckfast Abbey that I made one of the realizations. This is a golden rectangle, by the way, and I've extended the sides, so this is the greater. It's a square with greater sides, so that's the greater right there. That's the lesser. That would be unity or one. And this is the square root of the greater. This is going to be very important when we get to the Great Pyramid, where you look at what the Great Pyramid's all about. But what I discovered was I was in a kind of a half dream, half waking, half sleeping, kind of a hypnagogic state to a degree, and I realized if you create a right-angled triangle with the legs being the lesser and the greater, this must be square root of 3 exactly. Then I realized after talking to another friend that if in fact you have a right-angled triangle whose one leg is the square root of the greater, and then you have the lesser, you get exactly root 2. And then if you go across up here, you get essentially 1/2 root 2. And this is what the ancients did. This is the god Hermes. This is the god Apollo. By gematria, every letter is a number, and it translates into, or what they did was they took the names of the gods, created them such that they encoded the secrets of the mathematics. So Hermes, Apollo, and think what they did. The one gives the lyre to the other one gives the most sacred symbol there is, in addition to the pentagram, the caduceus to the other. They're brothers, it's reciprocity, music, the lyre. Sushumna, Ida, and Pingala, with the serpents going up that rod, that is absolutely sacred. And this is really Zeus is going up here. And it looks like Orion. And there's Orion's belt, and Sirius, and Isis is right there. And this is Osiris. And I'm quite certain that this was known in antiquity. It's only rediscovering what the ancients knew and didn't reveal. So in the book, we get all the golden polyhedra, which are 3-dimensional solids. And these golden cuts, if you examine this, we don't have time to get into the detail here. We'll look more in the study group. But you'll notice here, if you nest inside an octahedron and icosahedron, the vertex cuts the edge of the octahedron right at the golden cut exactly. If you stick an icosahedron inside of a cube and you take the edge of the cube, and if that's 1, the edge of the cube has to be the greater. Has to be. So it's all these resonances of the golden section in these Platonic solids. And Euclid's elements, people don't realize it. You move from point, line, plane to solid, 13th book. Take a line, cut it in extreme and mean ratio. That means to golden cut it. It's all about cutting the line in a golden section, nesting the solids, and then comparing them. This up here is really this. So this is an icosahedron with these three rectangles. These are golden rectangles. If you connect the vertices, that's one. That is exactly the greater across the edge. And so you have golden rectangles intersecting at right angles. And a good question that came up with Tony Maddox's comment, actually, and he's absolutely right. This is the dual of the dodecahedron, and these points go right into the center face of the pentagon of the dodecahedron. So likewise, the underlying scaffolding of the cosmos is golden rectangles in the dodecahedron as it is in the icosahedron. You truncate it, you cut these corners off, and you get a truncated icosahedron. It's a buckyball. This led to the Nobel Prize in Chemistry with your countryman, unfortunately passed away, good friend. I brought him to Ocala. Sir Harry Kroto won the Nobel Prize. Schechtman just got a Nobel Prize not that long ago for quasi-crystals. You take an edge here, it's one. You go to the other side, it's exactly, no approximations, 3 golden ratios, 3 times the greater to get to the other side. Ancient wisdom. So here I'm with Keith Critchlow. He's not in the picture, but we're building these huge dodecahedrons, and here we've got the pentagrams that are going to go inside the faces. We're doing it out of bamboo at Crestone. We'd alternate the school between England, and then we go, and sometimes we go to Chartres Cathedral and work there. But incredible teacher was Keith Critchlow. And here, in fact, I am with Keith Critchlow, John Michel, 2 of my most important teachers with sacred geometry. We're looking at some of his drawings. Keith, in a wonderful book, Time Stands Still, writes about root 3, root 2, and the golden mean. What he says is these 3 special ratios are directly related, as you already know, triangle, square, pentagon. They recur consistently throughout the proportioning of the great sacred buildings of mankind. That's where you get your pyramids, you get your mosques, you get your cathedrals. Wells Cathedral is my favorite of all of them. You get the Parthenon, you get the Acropolis, you get all these temples. It's absolutely stunning. But not only that, last year I was in Stornoway up in Scotland, and near Aberdeenshire they find all of these petrospheres, and they're carved out of granite and some of the hardest stone, and they don't disappear like so many artifacts unless they get swallowed up. And they're around the stone circles, and they're Platonic solids, and some of them are Archimedean solids. They're Neolithic, and some probably go back even much further. And there's a Mesolithic calendar system there. Look up Warren on the internet, and it is stunning. It's a lunar calendar, Mesolithic, not Neolithic. Again, it's throwing everything in a monkey wrench into it. Critchlow found these at the Ashmolean Museum, or similar ones, and they were in a drawer. Somebody could have stolen. These are some of the most sacred artifacts humanity has. And what John Michel says before he passed in The Dimensions of Paradise, man, temple, and cosmos, microcosm, mesocosm, macrocosm, were therefore seen to be identical. And on this understanding, the entire philosophy and science of the ancient world was founded. Well, he was one of my big fans, just as I was a fan of his, and he did a painting for me before he died. I'll see if I can read this. New Light on Phi, I guess I can. A book I greatly value, it's the pride of my collection, is Mr. Olsen's recent work upon the golden section. It's something that could change the world if they could understand it. But then you actually back up. He wrote this in a way, if they could understand it. I'm certain the authorities would long ago have banned it. The secret it exposes is the key to life's creation. I can't explain it in a line, so here's an illustration. Egypt and Greece, dear to my heart, both locations, both of them. It's nice to know there are horses there too. I got stuck with a camel. That's probably back in 2000. I was there when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. In fact, I was on top of the Great Pyramid the day he was threatening to bomb the monuments. I've probably been up there waving to the planes as they go over. But anyway, one thing to notice here, by the way, Khafra's pyramid would be very difficult to climb because the casing stones are there. But notice these indentations. Probably the capstone was locked in and steadied by this, and possibly the rest of the stones. And it's pretty scary when you get up there. I didn't know how I was going to get down once I got up. And it's about almost 50 stories up. And of course, I had to jump in there because I knew you're supposed to have an out-of-body experience and doing the measurements. That's King Tut's tomb. It's just like the shamans worldwide. The cat is the top of the food chain. That's why you see it in all the shamanic paintings that I have and in the catalog there. It's worldwide. Dionysus rides on the back of the leopard. It's the big cat because they have all the consciousness of the rainforest. Everything is there, and they're the representatives of all the damn stuff we've done to nature. It's humans. Yeah. Okay, here's the Great Pyramid. So here's the height, square root of phi, the greater. The apothegm is the golden ratio, the greater. And here's unity. That's why I wanted you to look at that construction I had done. Now, the day that I was doing ceremonies in the fertility temple at Teotihuacan outside Mexico City, we learned that morning that the muon studies they had done have revealed that electromagnetic energy, is what they're calling it, is channeled into what they call hidden chambers, king's chamber, queen's chamber, and then at the bottom of the pyramid you got that upside down chamber, as Casey called it. Very strange place, strangest place I've ever been. But and then of course they have to say, of course they didn't understand what they're doing. Right. Tell me about it. It's taken us this long to figure out what this initiation temple is. It's channeling all those energies into those locations. It's all based upon the divine proportion, even the king's chamber, the coffers, everything. It's just incredible. And Badawi studied over 50 temples in Egypt and discovered they're designed using Fibonacci numbers. Fibonacci numbers begin with 0 and 1. Every new number is the sum of the previous two. A child can do this. It's not complicated. 0 plus 1 is 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. 1 plus 2 is 3. 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, 89, 144 should be some dots here, and then it goes on into infinity. You take any two numbers, 1 to 1 is 1, 2 to 1 is 2, so within that range, very quickly, 3 divided by 2, 1.5, remember, golden ratio 1.6180, so 3 divided by 2, very close already, 5 divided by 3, 1.666, 8 divided by 5, 1.6. It goes above and below. But very quickly, it's zooming right in. If you take a strand of DNA, it's 34 angstroms in length, 21 angstroms in width. If you look at the head of a sunflower, you may find 34 spirals one direction. They're in golden ratio, 21 to the other. If you take the smaller number and divide by the larger, 2 divided by 3, 0.666, 3 divided by 5, 0.6, etc. So they're approximating in the limit. They're zooming in towards the lesser. In other words, nature is teleological. Teleos, ends, purposes. Everything in evolution is moving towards perfection through the golden ratio. It's everywhere. Most plants, by the way, or flowers, for example, have Fibonacci numbers. Most of them are pentagonal, because the moment you have 5 petals, you immediately get the golden ratio. So also in Egypt, in the Temple of Luxor, where Schwaller de Lubitsch, the Egyptologist alchemist, spent 15 years studying very carefully everything, he came to this conclusion, the same thing the Mahatmas are saying. The golden section is not a product of mathematical imagination. It's not something, yeah, you can take 5 and take the square root of it and add 1 and divide by 2, or subtract 1 and divide by 2 and get your greater and lesser. That's from the bottom up. The divine works ontologically. You heard that word the other day. It is not a mathematical equation. It is a move that could not be otherwise, and then it fractalizes, top to bottom. The quarks, you'll see in the little golden section book, or maybe in here, or in the study group you will, that the quarks are resonating to the golden ratios, hence the subatomic particles, you name it. My students say, well, where is it? I said, where is it not? Where do you not find it? Now, that doesn't mean you don't have root 2 and root 3, root 5. You do. But those are offshoots. The primary thing is the one in the indefinite dyad. So as he goes on to say, it is, like the Mahatma said, the natural principle of the laws of equilibrium. So there's equilibrium. It's the basis of karma, by the way. And when things are knocked out of equilibrium, they have to be replaced back into equilibrium. That's why it behooves us to go through a near-death experience or a vision quest or an initiation, or figure out how to balance the karma. Because when you die, you'll have more chances, but not then. That's why near-death experiencers have such an advantage, because they have this empathic life review. They realize their soul's purpose has gone off track, and then they come back, recalculating like a GPS. It puts you back into position, and the big deal is to find out your soul's purpose, to remember it. That's the key thing. All of us come into incarnation with a purpose in mind. And so if you go to Epidaurus in Greece now, I stood in the center of this, and I sent some friends up to the very last row, and I whispered. They said they could hear every syllable, every enunciation perfectly. It's like an ear. But not only that, there are 34 rows up to this point, 21 up there, 55. It's all Fibonacci approximations to the golden ratio. Phyllotaxis is probably the most interesting way to understand the golden ratio. And it's everywhere in nature. In fact, in the foreword here to Symmetry in Plants, golden section is put right at the front. And what they say, daisies and sunflowers are the emblems of phyllotaxis. All the problems of leaf arrangement, but it's more than that, are summarized there. Presence of particular numbers, Fibonacci numbers, angle of 137.5 degrees. My study group knows what that's all about, because if you golden cut a yardstick, you get 13 3/4 inches. 10 times 36 gives you the circle, the reason why we used yardsticks. The golden number, tau, used to be for tome, cut, as atome, atom, is uncuttable. And you see the four, and so they're looking, where is why? And demands an explanation. It's in Phyllotaxis, it's Symmetry in Plants, is most striking and puzzling. So you look at pineapple. Look at the rows here. You'll have 5, 8, 13. You multiply 5 times 13. Now these are whole numbers. 5 times 13 is 65, but 8 is the geometric mean of 64. So you have to add 1. You'll find that when you look at the Fibonacci numbers, every step of the way, you add or subtract 1. All steps to infinity. You look at the pine cone, 13 spirals going one way, 8 going the other. So we got to keep moving. So here is the ratios of the Fibonacci numbers, taking adjacent numbers, the larger divided by the smaller, and they're zooming in infinity towards the golden ratio. And here's probably the thumbprint of the divine, right here. You just take a sunflower. And here's your formula. Phi, 1 over phi is to 1 as 1 is to 1 over phi. Or the greater is to 1 as 1 is to the lesser. And here's your Fibonacci numbers, and here's a magical set of numbers, even more special. They don't occur as often because they're closer to the divine, and they're called the Lucas numbers, something that we'll talk more about in the study group. And when you come to the Bristol Lodge, I'll try to talk more about it there. There are 250,000 species of higher plants, another 250,000 in the rainforest they don't even know about. I'll tell you right now. There's distichus, at 180 degrees. There's whorled, where they do go at right angles. And then you have the spiral. Most plants are spiral. And the winding number, where the next bud comes up, in principle, a little more, a little less, 137.5 degrees. It is the modular of nature itself. But and I should give credit here to Brian Goodwin, who's now passed. He's everything Rupert Sheldrake is, and it was from Rupert that I learned about him, but also he's got all the Platonic solids, and he understands that. So underlying the diversity is an unexpected and startling degree of order. And so here's your golden cut. We've already talked about it. Genetics. It's all over the place. The Russians know better than we do, however. So in French as well. Nucleotide frequencies in the human genome and Fibonacci numbers. An investigation of Fibonacci-like sequences in biology and math. Pedakov, my good buddy that I met in the Ukraine, in Odessa. Metaphysical aspects of the matrix analysis of the genetic code in the golden section. Some of these people, like him, are going to be contributing to my divine proportion book. Applications of Fibonacci numbers. Frenchman, Perez, who's communicated with me recently, he discovered that the Codon populations have a DNA fractal and fine-tuned to the golden ratio. Here's the information. It's all golden. It's incredible. But again, I have to keep moving here. Chemistry and nanotechnology. I've only picked out a few of the things. I didn't address consciousness in here because I know I'll do that at the Bristol Lodge. Molecular nanotechnology. I learned this years ago at a quantum mind conference in Salzburg in Austria. And they're Bulgarians. And what they found is the golden means so powerful as a self-assembly in molecular biology, let's turn it to nanotechnology. And that's what they're doing. So they're taking the fullerenes and carbon nanotubes, and then they're suggesting, and artificial intelligence is at work with this, I must tell you, the self-assembly should be an intelligent solvent and an internal pulsing magnetic field driven by the golden mean. That reminds me of George Delaware and Douglas Baker, his medical assistant, and radionics. And so here we get the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for carbon-60, and notice, closest packing of space, hexagram inside a hexagon, life and consciousness. That's what's going on here with the pentagon and pentagram. Here we saw this already, a truncated icosahedron, and we know that's 3 golden ratios is to 1. Science News, fullerene drugs. Well, the trouble with HIV is it is an icosahedron. Even the bad stuff adopts the most sacred numbers, and it's difficult to deal with. So what are we doing? We're creating these cages that are truncated icosahedrons, and they're putting the drugs there, so they're calling them fullerene drugs. So here's an example of one of these Bucky drugs, as they call it. Golden cosmology. It was Kepler who said geometry has 2 great treasures: Pythagorean theorem and the golden cut of a line, what Euclid called division of a line in extreme and mean ratio. Notice what he refers to them for you who are into alchemy. One is a measure of gold, the other is a precious jewel. And there he nested the Platonic solids. Now my friend and editor of my, and publisher of my Golden Section book, did his own book, Little Book of Coincidences, averaged out the orbits of the planets, saw the incredible harmonics between the planets in relationship to each other. And if you look at Venus from the Earth over an 8-year period and connect all the dots, this is John Martineau now, you will connect them and you will get a pentagonal rosette, 8-5 golden ratio, Fibonacci's, and on Venus it's 13 years, 13, 8, 5. It's all resonance. Down here in the micro world, the below, we're finding it in the plants. Up above, we find it in the planets, their orbits and their sizes. Not only that, we've discovered TRAPPIST-1, this is probably where they're now looking for life. These planets are in a series of orbits, and their frequencies are 8, 5, 3, 2. Here's the musical fourth from my friend there, Robert, and here's unity or 1. They're in Fibonacci sequences with the musical fourth, and 4 of them are Earth-sized, and they have the possibility of liquid water. The stars themselves sing a fractal song. The frequency of the secondary note divided by the primary or lowest note gives a value near the golden ratio. And these are fractal stars that are pulsating. They're basically singing. The ones that don't do that, they don't have that ratio. It's quite interesting if you read this article, New Scientist, January 2015. Not only that, then the universe itself. The background radiation left over after the Big Bang, there are anomalous findings with the second and third harmonics, and so the prediction of Luminet is that the universe is dodecahedral. It's a Poincaré dodecahedron. You'll see it here in Science News back in 2003, and there was a big to-do about it. He made a lot of money because they funded him. They did the opposite to my buddy El Nashi because they're so afraid that he had so much knowledge. Okay, we've got, I think about, if I can do it in 10 minutes, we will. I'll try to do it in less.
About 2 minutes now.
I got, what do you mean 2 minutes?
2 minutes, 22.
Oh, I thought you said that I had...
22 is coming.
Okay, well then you're going to have to come to Bristol, but we can do it, I'll do it quickly in 2 minutes. The Lost Canon of Proportion of the Egyptians was presented by George Felt, September 7th, 1875. In it you'll see a star of perfection, circle, double square, common triangle, 2 Egyptian triangles, 2 pentagons, not just one. And he said that this is the law of proportional harmony that exists throughout. Animated discussion begins. Colonel Alcott sends a note via judge to HPB. We must start a society where we can have similar talks like this, and Felt will extract the key to the architecture of nature. He'll also show us how to control the elementals and actually manifest them. Unanimously, it was agreed society be formed to study occultism and Kabbalah. They didn't have the 3 objects, although brotherhood is consistent throughout. They agreed the name should be Theosophical Society to cover Felt's work, methods of occult research. Principle of brotherhood, very important, became the dominating object. This was going to go to press. It was announced, but it got destroyed in a fire. Felt became one of the first vice presidents, Alcott and Judge also involved. Here's the lecture titles, the first 3, we'll see this at Bristol. 4th one he didn't show up for. They were discouraged. He wasn't coming around, but they're discouraged about Blavatsky. That's what you folks don't realize. They had also counted upon HPB to display her powers, but she refused to do the slightest phenomenon, as he did. Demarest says one thing. I'll tell you what I found. He didn't want to reveal the technique in front of everyone. What was most important, that Blavatsky put in the scrapbook, and Mr. Felt has done it in the presence of 9 persons in all. He succeeded in doing it. There's George Henry Felt. Here's some of the things that remnants we do have. Claude Bragdon took and wrote a letter. He said the golden section everywhere appears, because he got some of the fragments. Here's some of the images. Here's probably one of the key images. The key thing now is we are on the threshold of a new renaissance. The same golden proportion is infused throughout nature and the cosmos. It's at the heart of beauty, optimal function in all fields. It's at the roots of the Theosophical Society and its potential renaissance. So let me close with this. I thought the 2 presentations by Pam Evans and Jenny Baker, Pam's Finding the Wisdom Within, and Jenny's The Real Meaning of Brotherhood, I'll tell you, inspirational to a T. Perfect. What we need. I recently watched one of my favorite hero's journeys, Cinderella. You're going to laugh. Cinderella's mother told her before she died 2 things: courage, kindness. Theosophical Society needs to have the courage to seek the truth in inner transformations, and also the courage to be kind in the true brotherhood and sisterhood of what we actually are all about. Thank you very much.